Hey guys, welcome back to Marksman Radio. I am Chris. Thank you so much for stopping by. Now on this channel, I'm going to be doing two types of videos. The first is the type of video you've already seen, the political sort of focused type of video. The second is going to be more focused on business. Now on my main channel, Marksman TV, I did do a series of gun store vlogs where I gave sort of industry advice for people who were thinking about opening a gun store, or maybe people who did run a gun store, sort of giving some business type of ideas or sort of ways of thinking about certain things to you guys. Now I'm going to sort of be moving that concept over here, but instead of focusing just on the firearms industry as a whole, I'm going to be sort of talking about business in general. So just some business concepts that hopefully could even be applied to your industry if you are not in the gun industry or anything like that. So anyway, just as a further note, if it's a political based video, it will have a little red emoji in the title. If it's business related, it'll be a blue emoji. So that way you guys know what sort of the basis of that content is. So my first topic for this type of vlog is what it's like to operate inside of a volatile industry. Now, when I was a kid growing up, my dad, of course, he's always worked inside the airlines. And I remember when I was in college, my roommate was getting into accounting, which is what my dad does. And my dad worked with United Airlines at the time in Chicago. My good friend wanted to get an internship there. So he went and talked to him and he said, you know, what advice can you give me? My roommate was talking to my dad. He said, what advice can you give me for my career in accounting? And my dad simply said, don't go into the airline industry. And what he basically meant by that was the airline industry is such a volatile industry. It's any tiny little subtle change in anything that's happening inside the world can have catastrophic effects on the airline industry. Of course, the most notable example of that would be 9/11. There was that volcano that erupted 10 or 12 years ago, completely decimated the airline industry because, of course, visibility was so bad on a lot of the travel routes that they couldn't operate flights. And of course, what's going on right now with this pandemic is there's very little flights that are operating during some periods of time during this pandemic. Flight scheduling to different parts of the world had been postponed or canceled. And of course, we're seeing a lot of people afraid of flying because they don't want to be in confined spaces with other people. So the airline industry was just one of those examples of there's always these sort of external forces or these things that could happen that could drastically change or affect your business. Now, it's funny that my dad would say not to go into that type of business, and then here I am entering the firearms industry, which is also an incredibly volatile business. So you have things drastically affect demand, such as elections, political elections. So when President Obama enters office, of course, we see demand skyrocket for firearm sales. When we see President Trump enter office, we see demand plummet. When we see things like this virus coming up, we see demand and things explode. But when we see, no talking of legislation or anything like that happening, we see demand in firearms and ammunition drop. So the firearms industry is also a very volatile industry. So is it necessarily bad to be in a volatile industry? And I've actually thought at first it's a little bit scary because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what events are going to happen that can drastically change demand inside your industry. But having been in the firearms industry now for 7 years, I'm actually finding that I personally, as a business person, find the volatility in my industry to work tremendously to my advantage. And I'll sort of use an analogy here to explain this point, or sort of a fictitious representation here. So let's use we have a pond, and in that pond we have 10 fishing boats, and these fishing boats obviously pull the fish out of the water, they go on shore, and then they sell their product to the customers. So in this fishing pond of 10 fishing boats, let's say 4 of the fishing boats, they're made up of fishermen that are very lazy, and they do what they need to do to get by. They've never had to change or adapt their strategy because there's always been fish and there's always been customers. Then you have 4 fishing boats where the fishermen are they're proactive. They try and do a good job of trying to innovate a little bit to capture a little bit more fish. They might have some interesting branding or advertising strategies to be able to sell their fish at the same price as the fishing boats that are run by the lazier fishermen, just capture a little bit more of the market share, not as ambitious. Then you have 2 boats in the water where the fishermen are extremely aggressive. They're very competitive. They want to have the best pricing. They want to catch the biggest fish. They want to offer the most value to their customers. Now, during a normal environment, there's plenty of fish and there's plenty of customers on the shore ready to buy the product. It's always bright and sunny. There's always fish biting. There's plenty of bait. There's never a problem. And that's sort of a a type of industry where really no matter what's going on short of a total economic collapse, they can just steady the course. They always have their product, they always have their customers, and it's never a problem. What happens when something happens disruptive to that sort of ecosystem of those 10 fishing boats? Let's just say a little microbe enters the fishing pool and kills off half the fish. So now we have the same 10 fishing boats, but only half the amount of product. Well, obviously we can look at the 4 lazy fishermen. They're not going to adapt. They're not going to change to the situation. They're going to continue doing things the way they were doing them. What does that mean? By that same process, they're going to catch half as many fish because half the fish that they used to fish from are now gone. Of course, because they don't have as much product, they can't sell enough to sustain their fishing operation. So those 4 fishermen, have to go out of business. Now let's look at the 4 who try and do what they can. They try and make predictions on the market. They try and innovate as much as they can. But basically they're sustainers. They just try and sustain their business model as it exists. They know that something bad has happened. Their supply has dwindled. Therefore, what do? They might try and do things to innovate, to get their sales level just high enough to get them out of the slump, hoping for the time when the economic prosperity returns, when more fish multiply, the microbe dies off, and then the fishing supply comes back to what it was, and then they continue business as usual. Now, in this case, we'll see half of them go out of business. We'll see 2 of the 4, they just can't sustain themselves. They have to go out of business. The other 2 are able to just sort of break even until they get through it. Now, let's look at our competitive fishing boats. The competitive fishing boats are trying to do things to innovate their operations to make their situation better. They're creating better fishing lures. They're creating better ad campaigns. They're trying to attract bigger fish. They're doing everything they can, not only just to sustain themselves in this poor time, but also to create growth. And they're creating growth because now they're seeing their competitors drop out of the water, literally. So what happens when the stability of the situation returns? They are back in a full fishing pond full of fish, full of customers, full of product, but half of their competition is now gone. They've now innovated so they can enjoy their innovations. Not only are those other fishing boats out of the water, but they took the time to develop new fishing technology. They took the time to develop new ad strategies. So not only are they in a better environment, but they're much stronger. They're able to not only do as well as they were doing before, but they're able to prosper. And really, businesses really only take the time to create those innovations when they're in a period of downturn. They're in a volatile industry that's constantly being affected by things. And therefore, they had to take the opportunity to react to those things, make decisions that can better their situation in that current market, so that hopefully when that market returns, again, they're not just doing as well, they're doing a lot better. Now, applying this to my own business, I am a very competitive person, and I'm going to use an example here. So back before the 2016 election, a lot of us thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. What did that mean for gun sales? Okay, if Clinton had won, we were going to see gun sales absolutely skyrocket. And so we saw people like me, we saw Dick's Sporting Goods. We were purchasing up as many AR-15s and 5.56 ammunition, 9mm ammunition as we could. We were paying a premium for it. The wholesalers were raising their prices because it looked like it was going to be a pretty safe bet that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. That's what all the polls said. It looked like it was going to be a sure thing. Now what happens, and I'll never forget this, it was about 2 or 3 in the morning Eastern time, when they finally called the election for President Trump. And I remember saying to myself, because at this time, we were still in the growth phase. I had only been in business at that time for about 2 years. So I was still growing. Keep in mind, it takes most businesses about 3 years to hit profitability. We were operating just at about break even at that time. And I'm ready for this big surge in demand. I was ready to go into work the next day, and I was going to have lines out the door. I was ready to sell out of everything. I had bought all this product, preparing for it. President Trump wins, and I remember saying to myself, I'm not quite making money in the market that existed, and I know the market is about to be way down here. It's about to tank. And that's exactly what happened. The consumer purchasing. Sturm Ruger and Smith & Wesson have still reported nothing but losses since the election, and demand has been way down. Not talking about what happened with the whole recent pandemic. Actually, until then, that was a big sort of pump, a rejuvenating pump into the demand in the gun market. But everything had been pretty much depressed. But I remember sitting there that night and I was like, well, in order to survive this, I'm going to have to change what I'm doing. If I continue what I'm doing already, I'm just about hitting break even, and I'm going to be in a period of lower demand. I need to do something to push everything up a bar, everything I can to do to just push myself higher and further, because if I go through another year or 2 years and I start losing money, I'm going to have to close this business. And that's a conversation I had with myself. The next day, I made the decision I was going to start a YouTube channel. I was going to start a club rewards program, which I've done through my store, and I was going to be remarkably aggressive on my pricing. So a lot of you guys have seen on the Used Guns of the Week video, my pricing is incredibly aggressive on my used firearm inventory. It's created a huge name for me, not only locally, but nationally because of my pricing. And no, it's not that I'm ignorant to what the pricing is and I'm selling everything lower than I should be. I do that on purpose because with every firearm that I sell below cost, not only am I going to be getting myself a return customer, somebody who's interested in coming back and purchasing from me. I'm creating a lot of buzz around that firearm. I'm putting up videos with those firearms and those prices, and they get lots of views. So to me, that's advertising and also creating good faith and equity with my customer base who come back repeatedly for my products. The second thing is my YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel went exponentially crazier than I thought it would. I mean, I get ad revenue from it, which definitely helps. And not only that, but it gets me a ton of exposure locally and nationally. I get people who come in, call. I mean, people will drive from different states actually and stop by and see my store. It's a very tiny store, but I get a ton of notoriety from my YouTube channel. The third thing is my rewards program. So I do have a lot of my really good customers. I've retained them through my loyalty program. So when people come into my store and make purchases, they get to get back credit from their purchases. It keeps people loyal to my store. People will come back. And I mean, if I have a firearm at the same price as a competitor, they'll come to me because they get points. Those points add up. I've had customers actually buy guns with their points. So it's 2.5% to 3.5% of the purchase goes onto their card. Those points accumulate. And the more that they spend, the more that grows. And then they can spend those rewards points on other people. And that's turned out to be very popular, especially in retaining my really good high spending customers. The point is I was in a situation of volatility, and I'm going to continue to see situations of volatility in this industry. But in that situation of volatility, I had to make I have to try harder. I have to call more customers. I need to make fundamental changes to my business to make my business approach more aggressive. I need to capture market share, not only locally, but globally, or nationally, because there's not a whole lot of market share there to get. There's not as many fish in that pond anymore. And what can I do to capture as many of them as I can? During this period under the Trump administration, we've seen a lot of gun stores go out of business, and I've actually done nothing but grow in sales year after year after year. And when we are in a period, we're not there yet, but when we are in a period of return to heightened demand, and we'll see what happens in the 2020 election, we're seeing what's going on with this virus now. Those innovations are not only going to have paid off then, they're going to pay off exponentially when the market returns. So a period of low market and a period of low demand, one of those bad black swan events, is an environment that I've learned that I personally as a business person can thrive in, and those are the environments I like. So being in a volatile industry is very good for me in an industry I love being in, and it's an industry that's really good for competitive people. Now, if you're thinking about going into a volatile industry like the firearm industry, the whole point of this is to be prepared to be in that mindset, to be extremely competitive and innovative in your thought processes of what you're going to do when your business, if you're just running the course and you hit this period of low demand, what can you do to completely change or alter your business model to be completely different from what your local or national competitors are doing to capture as much of that market share as possible? So I will leave you guys there with a quote from Henry David Thoreau that says, "If we are quiet and patient enough, we can find compensation in every disappointment." If you are entering business or in life, any situation which is negative is a perfect opportunity to shine and put yourself above everybody else in no matter what it is you're doing. So anyway, guys, I'm going to leave you there. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out my first business-centric vlog here on Marksman Radio. If you enjoyed, please let me know by leaving a comment down in the comment section. Let me know if you want more of this type of stuff. Too in-depth, not in-depth enough, too short, too long. Let me know. Kind of my first thing. Again, this channel is just for me to throw my ideas out there, just talk about things I want to talk about. So I wanted to talk about this today with everything going on. But anyway, guys, thanks again for stopping by. I am Chris with Marksman Radio, and I will talk to you guys next time.